My wife Samantha was screwing my business partner, and I was the last person in Seattle to know about it. That's what happens when you're busy building a tech empire while your supposedly devoted spouse is building something else entirely with your supposedly loyal partner. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I'm John Carter, 38 years old, CEO of TechFlow Solutions, and apparently the biggest fool in the Pacific Northwest. But here's the thing about fools, sometimes we're just playing a longer game than everyone else realizes. It was Thursday morning when my perfect world started cracking like cheap concrete. I was in my home office reviewing quarterly reports when I heard Samantha on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice had that breathy quality she used to reserve for me, back when she actually gave a damn about our marriage. "Jake, you know I can't wait much longer," she was saying. "He's always buried in those spreadsheets. He has no idea what's really going on." Jake Rivers, my business partner of 5 years, the man who'd helped me build TechFlow from a garage startup into a $40 million company, the guy I trusted with everything, my business, my family barbecues, my life. I crept closer to the kitchen doorway, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floors. "The merger documents are almost ready," Samantha continued. "Once you get him to sign, we'll have controlling interest. Then we can push him out completely." This wasn't just about an affair. This was about destroying everything I'd built. "Tanya thinks we should move faster," Samantha said, referring to her best friend and apparently co-conspirator. "She says the longer we wait, the more chance he has of figuring it out." I backed away slowly, my mind racing. 20 years of marriage, 2 kids, a business partnership that had survived 3 recessions and countless late nights. All of it was a lie. But here's what Samantha and Jake didn't know about me. I'd grown up poor in Detroit, where you learned early that the only person you could truly trust was yourself. I'd clawed my way to success by being smarter, more ruthless, and infinitely more patient than anyone expected. They wanted to play games? Fine. But they were about to learn that I wrote the rulebook. I spent the rest of the morning acting normal, kissing Samantha goodbye when she left for her charity committee meeting, waving to the kids as they headed off to school. Maya, 11 years old with her mother's blonde hair and my stubborn streak. Lucas, 8 and already showing signs of my analytical mind. They deserved better than parents who were about to go to war. At the office, I watched Jake differently. Really watched him. The way he smirked when he thought I wasn't looking. How he'd been pushing for me to sign those merger documents, claiming it was just restructuring for tax purposes. The expensive watch he was wearing. A Rolex I'd never seen before. "John, you've been staring at that contract for 20 minutes, Jake said, sliding into the chair across from my desk. He was tall, athletic, with a kind of easy charm that made people trust him instantly. I'd fallen for it completely. "Just being thorough," I replied, not looking up. "You know me, I like to read the fine print." "That's why we make such a good team. You handle the details, I handle the big picture." He leaned back, completely relaxed. "Speaking of which, Samantha mentioned you two might need some time away. Marriage counseling or something?" The audacity was breathtaking. He was sleeping with my wife and suggesting therapy for our relationship problems. "Did she now?" I kept my voice level. "What else did Samantha mention?" "Nothing much. Just that you've been distant lately. Working too much, not paying enough attention to family." Jake's smile was perfectly sympathetic. "Maybe you should consider delegating more. Let me take on some of your responsibilities." "I'll think about it," I said, signing my name with deliberate care. But I wasn't signing the merger documents. I was signing a memo requesting a full audit of all company accounts. Jake didn't notice the difference. He was too busy planning my downfall to pay attention to details. That afternoon, I called Brian Kowalski, my old friend from college, who now ran a cybersecurity firm. If anyone could help me figure out exactly what I was dealing with, it was Brian. "John Carter, you snake." Brian's voice boomed through the phone. "What's it been, 6 months since you crawled out of your tech cave?" "I need a favor, Brian, a big one." "This sounds ominous. What kind of favor?" "The kind that requires your special skills and absolute discretion." There was a pause. "Are we talking about corporate espionage or personal?" "Both." "Interesting. My rates just doubled." We met at a dive bar in Georgetown, the kind of place where nobody cared about your problems as long as you paid for your drinks. Brian looked exactly the same as he had in college. Rumpled shirt, thick glasses, the appearance of someone who'd rather be debugging code than dealing with humans. "So," he said, sliding into the booth across from me, "who are we investigating?" "My wife and my business partner." Brian's eyebrows shot up. "Jesus, John. That's some serious soap opera stuff." I told him everything I'd overheard, everything I suspected. Brian listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making notes on his phone. "Okay," he said finally. "Here's what we're going to do. First, I'm going to set up monitoring on all your business accounts, legally, since you're the CEO. Second, I'm going to help you secure your personal assets before they disappear. Third, we're going to gather enough evidence to bury both of them." "I don't want them arrested," I said. "I want them destroyed." Brian grinned. "Now you're talking my language." The next morning, I woke up to find Samantha already gone. A note on the kitchen counter said she was having breakfast with Tanya to plan some charity auction. The lies were getting more elaborate. I made coffee and checked my secure email. Brian had been busy overnight. He'd already found 3 suspicious transactions from our business accounts, all authorized by Jake and routed through shell companies I'd never heard of. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Board meeting at 2 p.m. Need to discuss the Henderson contract." There was no Henderson contract. This was it. They were making their move. I spent the morning preparing. First, I transferred my personal assets to accounts that Samantha couldn't access. Then I called our family lawyer, David Martinez, and scheduled an emergency appointment. "John, you look terrible," David said when I walked into his office. "What's going on?" I handed him a folder containing printouts of everything Brian had found. "I need you to prepare divorce papers, full custody of the kids, and I want Samantha to get nothing." David's face grew grim as he read through the evidence. "This is serious stuff. Corporate fraud, adultery, conspiracy. Are you sure you want to go nuclear?" "They fired the first shot," I said. "I'm just returning fire." The board meeting was a setup, just as I'd expected. Jake had called in 3 outside consultants, lawyers by the look of them. Samantha was there too, which was unusual since she wasn't officially part of the company. "Gentlemen," Jake began, "we're here to discuss some concerning irregularities in the company's financial management." I almost laughed. The sheer balls of the man were impressive. "What kind of irregularities?" I asked, settling back in my chair like I didn't have a care in the world. "Unauthorized transfers, questionable expenditures, possible embezzlement," one of the lawyers said, sliding a thick folder across the table. "We have evidence suggesting you've been siphoning money from company accounts for personal use." I opened the folder and pretended to study the documents. They were good, professional forgeries that painted me as a corrupt CEO stealing from his own company. If I hadn't known better, I might have been convinced myself. "This is very serious," I said gravely. "If these allegations are true, the person responsible should face the full consequences." Jake leaned forward, smelling victory. "We're prepared to handle this quietly, John. Resign as CEO, transfer your shares to the company, and we won't press charges." "That's very generous," I said, "but I have a counter-proposal." I pulled out my own folder, much thicker than theirs, and spread the contents across the conference table. Bank statements, email printouts, photographs, phone records. The complete story of their betrayal, documented in excruciating detail. The room went silent. "You see," I continued conversationally, "while you two were busy forging documents and planning my downfall, I was doing what I do best, gathering data. Brian Kowalski sends his regards, by the way. He was very impressed by your digital footprint." Samantha had gone pale. Jake was staring at the evidence like it might catch fire. "Here's what's actually going to happen," I said, standing up. "Jake, you're fired, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building, and if you ever set foot on company property again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing." "You can't do this," Jake sputtered. "I have contracts, agreements." "You have nothing," I cut him off. "Check your employment contract, the one you signed 5 years ago. Section 12, subsection 4, immediate termination for fraud or breach of fiduciary duty. No severance, no benefits, no references." I turned to Samantha. "As for you, dear wife, you'll be hearing from my lawyer. I'm filing for divorce on grounds of adultery and conspiracy to commit fraud. I'm seeking full custody of the children and dissolution of all marital assets." "John, please," Samantha started, but I held up a hand. 20 years, Samantha. 20 years of marriage, and this is what it meant to you. A chance to steal everything I built and run off with my business partner." The lawyers Jake had brought were quietly packing their briefcases, clearly wanting no part of whatever came next. The board members, my actual board members, were staring at the evidence with expressions of shock and disgust. "This meeting is adjourned," I announced. "Jake, security is waiting outside. Samantha, I suggest you find somewhere else to sleep tonight. The locks have been changed." As they filed out, Jake stopped at the door. "This isn't over, John." "You're absolutely right," I replied. "It's just getting started." That evening I sat in my empty house, empty because Samantha was staying with Tanya and the kids were at their grandparents' for the weekend. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and called Brian. Phase 1 complete, I reported. Jake's out, divorce papers are filed, and they know I'm on to them. How'd they take it? About as well as you'd expect. Jake threatened me, Samantha tried to play the victim. Standard operating procedure for cornered rats. What's phase 2? I smiled, taking a sip of bourbon. Now we get creative. Jake Rivers had always been proud of his image. Designer clothes, expensive car, penthouse apartment overlooking Elliott Bay. He cultivated the persona of a successful tech executive, the kind of guy who closed deals on the golf course and dated models before settling down. What he hadn't counted on was how quickly that image could be destroyed. I started small. Brian helped me access Jake's social media accounts. Not hacking, just using the passwords Jake had foolishly saved on his work computer. A few strategic posts about his new business ventures and exciting opportunities painted him as desperate and delusional. Then I got more creative. Jake's pride and joy was his silver Porsche 911 Turbo. He'd bought it the previous year, claiming it was a business expense. Every morning, he'd park it in the same spot in the company garage, spending 5 minutes checking for scratches and wiping down the paint. Since he was no longer allowed in the company garage, he'd started parking on the street near his apartment. Big mistake. At 3 a.m, wearing dark clothes and a baseball cap, I paid Jake's car a visit. I didn't damage it. That would have been criminal. Instead, I decorated it. Bumper stickers proclaiming, "I brake for cheaters," and "honk if you've committed fraud" covered the rear end. Washable paint spelled out "liar" on the windshield. But the masterpiece was the fish. 2 pounds of salmon carefully placed in the air conditioning intake. Jake would smell that for weeks. I was back home in bed by 4 a.m., sleeping better than I had in months. The next morning brought a furious phone call from Jake. "You snake," he snarled. "I know it was you." "I have no idea what you're talking about," I replied innocently. "I was home all night. Ask my security system. It keeps detailed logs." "This is harassment. I'm calling the police." "Please do. I'm sure they'll be very interested in those fraud charges we discussed." Jake hung up without another word, but I was just warming up. Samantha had always been proud of her social standing. She served on the boards of 3 different charities, hosted elaborate dinner parties, and maintained an active presence on social media showcasing our perfect family life. That image was about to take a serious hit. I'd kept copies of everything, the text messages between her and Jake, the emails planning my downfall, even some rather explicit photos she'd sent him. I didn't plan to release them publicly. I'm not that cruel, but I didn't need to. The threat was enough. I started with her charity boards. A few anonymous tips about her financial irregularities and questionable associations were enough to get her quietly removed from all 3 organizations. Charity boards hate scandal more than anything else. Then I went after her social circle. Tanya might have been her best friend, but the other women in Samantha's book club and tennis group were fair-weather friends at best. A few carefully placed rumors about the divorce, the affair, and the fraud charges were enough to make Samantha persona non grata at every country club and boutique in Seattle. Within a week, she'd gone from social butterfly to social pariah. But Jake wasn't finished. If anything, my pranks had made him more dangerous. I was leaving the office late Thursday evening when I noticed the footsteps behind me. The parking garage was nearly empty, just a few cars scattered across 2 levels. The footsteps matched my pace exactly, speeding up when I did, slowing down when I did. I turned around casually, pretending to check my phone. 2 men were following me. One was Jake. I recognized his expensive suit and arrogant posture. The other was a stranger, built like a linebacker, with the kind of face that suggested violence was his preferred method of problem solving. "Hello, John?" Jake called out, his voice echoing in the concrete space. "We need to talk." "I thought I made myself clear," I replied, continuing toward my car. "We have nothing to discuss." "I think we do." Jake nodded to his companion, who stepped forward menacingly. This was Rico Valdez, I realized. Jake had mentioned him before, a security consultant who handled difficult situations for various clients, the kind of man who solved problems with his fists rather than his brain. "Here's how this is going to work," Jake continued. "You're going to drop the fraud charges, reinstate me at the company, and give Samantha an uncontested divorce with half of everything. In exchange, Rico here won't rearrange your face?" I stopped walking and turned to face them fully. "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." I pulled out my phone and held it up. "Brian, are you getting this?" Jake's face went white. "What?" "I've been recording everything since you started following me," I explained. "Brian's been listening in through my phone's conference feature. Say hello, Brian." "Hello, assholes." Brian's voice came through the speaker, tinny but clear. I've also got a nice view of the parking garage through the security cameras. Smile for the birdie. Rico looked confused, but Jake was smart enough to realize he'd been outmaneuvered. This isn't over, Jake said, backing away. You keep saying that, I replied, but you never seem to learn. As they disappeared into the stairwell, I allowed myself a small smile. They were getting desperate, which meant they were getting sloppy, and sloppy people make mistakes. The custody hearing was scheduled for the following Wednesday, and I was confident in my position. I had evidence of Samantha's affair, her involvement in the fraud scheme, and her general unfitness as a parent. David Martinez had prepared a case that should have been a slam dunk. What I didn't expect was for Samantha and Jake to go completely off the rails. Tuesday evening, I was at home preparing dinner for Maya and Lucas. They were spending the week with me while the custody arrangement was being sorted out. Maya was helping me make spaghetti while Lucas built elaborate structures with his Legos at the kitchen table. Dad, Maya said quietly, is Mom really not coming home? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. For all my planning and scheming, I'd tried to shield the kids from the worst of it. They knew their parents were getting divorced, but they didn't know why. I don't know, sweetheart, I said honestly. Your mom and I have some things to work out. Is it because of Uncle Jake? I nearly dropped the pot of boiling water. What do you mean? Mom's been talking to Uncle Jake a lot, and they were acting weird at Lucas's birthday party. Like they had secrets. Kids notice everything. I'd forgotten that. Sometimes adults make bad choices, I said carefully. But no matter what happens between your mom and me, we both love you and Lucas very much. Maya nodded solemnly, but I could see she wasn't entirely satisfied with my answer. My phone rang at 11 p.m., just as I was getting ready for bed. Unknown number. John Carter? Speaking. This is Detective Sarah Chen with Seattle PD. We need to talk. What about? Your children, Mr. Carter. They've been reported missing. I ran to their rooms. Empty beds, no sign of struggle, their overnight bags gone. The back door was unlocked. When did you last see them? Detective Chen asked when she arrived 20 minutes later. 8:30, when I tucked them in. I checked on them at 10. They were both asleep. I was trying to stay calm, but panic was clawing at my chest. Who reported them missing? Anonymous tip. Caller said they saw 2 children being forced into a car outside this address. I knew immediately who had taken them. It was my wife and her boyfriend. This is about the custody hearing tomorrow. Detective Chen looked skeptical. Do you have any proof of that? I called Brian, who arrived within minutes with his laptop and a grim expression. I've been monitoring Samantha's phone, he said without preamble. Last GPS ping was at a motel in Renton, the Sleepy Inn on Rainier Avenue. That's not legal evidence, Detective Chen pointed out. I don't care about legal evidence, I snapped. I care about finding my children. The Sleepy Inn was exactly the kind of place people went when they didn't want to be found. Cash only, no questions asked, the kind of establishment that had seen better decades. Detective Chen insisted on handling the approach officially, but I wasn't waiting for warrants and procedures. I went around back while she knocked on the front door of room 237. Through the thin walls, I could hear voices. Samantha, Jake, and Tanya. The kids were crying. This is insane, Tanya was saying. Kidnapping? This is kidnapping, Samantha. It's not kidnapping, Samantha replied. They're my children. I'm just keeping them safe until the custody hearing. By hiding in a motel? With a man who threatened their father? Jake didn't threaten anyone. He was just trying to reason with John. I'd heard enough. I called Detective Chen and told her what I'd overheard, then positioned myself by the back window where I could see inside. Maya was sitting on one of the beds, holding Lucas protectively. Both children looked terrified. Jake was pacing by the window, occasionally peering through the curtains. Samantha was on the phone, probably with a lawyer. Detective Chen's knock on the front door sent everyone into a panic. Seattle police, open the door. What do we do? Tanya whispered frantically. Stay calm, Jake said. They can't prove anything. But Samantha was already cracking. This was a mistake. We should never have taken them. It's too late now, Jake hissed. We're committed. Detective Chen knocked again, louder. I know you're in there. Open the door or we're coming in. That's when Jake made his fatal mistake. Instead of surrendering, he grabbed Maya's arm and pulled her toward the back door, straight toward where I was waiting. The door opened, and Jake stepped out with my daughter. Let her go, I said quietly. Jake spun around, startled. In his surprise, he loosened his grip on Maya, who immediately ran to me. Daddy, she sobbed, throwing her arms around my waist. It's okay, baby, I whispered. You're safe now. Jake tried to run, but Detective Chen was already coming around the building with backup. He was tackled in the parking lot, his expensive suit tearing on the asphalt. Inside the room, Samantha was sitting on the bed with her head in her hands while Lucas clung to Tanya, who looked like she was reconsidering every life choice that had led her to this moment. "Samantha Carter," Detective Chen said, "you're under arrest for kidnapping, child endangerment, and conspiracy." As they led her away in handcuffs, Samantha looked at me with pure hatred. "This isn't over, John." "Yes," I said, holding my children close. "It is." The kidnapping charges changed everything. What had started as a corporate fraud case and messy divorce had escalated into a criminal matter that made headlines across Seattle. Tech CEO's wife and partner arrested in child kidnapping scheme dominated the local news cycle for days. Jake and Samantha were released on bail, but the damage was done. Jake's reputation in the tech community was destroyed. No company would touch him now. Samantha's carefully cultivated social image was in ruins, and her legal bills were mounting. But I wasn't satisfied. They'd threatened my children, traumatized Maya and Lucas, and tried to destroy everything I'd built. Professional and personal ruin wasn't enough. I wanted total annihilation. The plan I developed with Brian was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of just defending against their attacks, we were going to use their own greed and desperation against them. "Here's what we're going to do," I explained to Brian over coffee at our usual dive bar. "We're going to give them exactly what they want, a chance to steal everything from me." Brian raised an eyebrow. "That seems counterproductive." "Not if they're stealing something worthless." I'd spent the past week setting up a shell company, Carter Digital Holdings. On paper, it looked like I was moving all my assets into this new entity, probably to hide them from the divorce proceedings. The company appeared to be worth approximately $60 million, including my stake in TechFlow and various investments. In reality, Carter Digital Holdings was an empty shell backed by nothing but fabricated documents and creative accounting. The bait was irresistible. Through carefully planted rumors and leaked documents, I let Jake and Samantha discover the existence of the shell company. To their greedy eyes, it looked like I was trying to hide my wealth, which meant there was something valuable to steal. Jake took the bait exactly as I'd hoped. He approached Angela Wu, the CEO of Meridian Tech and my biggest competitor. Angela had been trying to acquire TechFlow for years, and Jake offered her a deal. He'd help her steal my hidden assets, in exchange for a position at Meridian and a percentage of the take. What Jake didn't know was that Angela and I had been in secret negotiations for months about a legitimate merger. She was already on my side. "He's even dumber than you said," Angela told me over lunch at the Columbia Tower Club. "He actually thinks he can sell me your company out from under you." "What did you tell him?" "That I'm very interested in his proposal. I'm meeting with him and Samantha tomorrow to discuss the details." The meeting was held at Angela's office, in a conference room that Brian had thoroughly bugged with Angela's permission. Jake and Samantha arrived dressed for success, clearly believing they were about to pull off the heist of the century. "The way I see it," Jake explained to Angela, "John's trying to hide his assets in this shell company. If we can get control of Carter Digital Holdings, we essentially control everything he owns." "And how do you propose we do that?" Angela asked. Samantha leaned forward eagerly. "I still have access to some of John's accounts. With the right legal documents, I can transfer the shell company to you, and Jake can make sure the paperwork looks legitimate." "In exchange for what?" $10 million, Jake said. 5 for me, 5 for Samantha. Plus I want a senior position at Meridian. Angela pretended to consider the offer. "This is quite risky. If John discovers what we're doing—" "He won't," Samantha said confidently. "He's too busy playing the victim and preparing for the custody trial. By the time he realizes what happened, it'll be too late." "All right," Angela said finally. "I'm in." They spent the next hour working out the details of their theft, completely unaware that every word was being recorded. Jake even bragged about the kidnapping, claiming it had been a negotiating tactic, rather than a desperate crime. When they left Angela's office, they thought they'd just arranged the perfect crime. They had no idea they'd just confessed to conspiracy, fraud, and a dozen other felonies. The press conference was scheduled for Friday afternoon at the TechFlow offices. I'd invited every major news outlet in Seattle, plus several national tech publications. The conference room was packed with reporters, cameras, and curious onlookers. Jake and Samantha had no idea what was coming. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, standing at the podium with Angela Wu beside me, "thank you for coming. Today we're announcing a major development in the ongoing investigation into corporate fraud and conspiracy at TechFlow Solutions." In the back of the room, I spotted Jake and Samantha. They'd shown up uninvited, probably hoping to disrupt whatever I was planning to announce. Jake looked smug, clearly believing he held all the cards. Over the past several weeks, I continued, we've been working with law enforcement to expose a conspiracy involving corporate espionage, fraud, and attempted theft of company assets. I nodded to Brian, who started the first video presentation. The screen behind me filled with images of forged documents, bank records, and email exchanges. The conspiracy was led by my former business partner, Jake Rivers, and my estranged wife, Samantha Carter. Their plan was to frame me for embezzlement, steal control of my company, and disappear with millions of dollars in assets. Jake started to stand up, but Detective Chen, who'd been waiting by the door, gestured for him to sit back down. But the story doesn't end there, I said, advancing to the next slide. When their initial plan failed, they escalated to kidnapping my children in an attempt to force me to comply with their demands. The room erupted in murmurs and camera clicks. This was bigger than anyone had expected. And finally, I said, when they were arrested and released on bail, they attempted one last theft, trying to steal what they believed were my hidden assets through a fraudulent shell company. The screen now showed video footage from Angela's conference room, Jake and Samantha in their own words, planning to steal millions of dollars and bragging about their crimes. The effect was immediate and devastating. Jake's face went white as he heard his own voice describing the kidnapping as a negotiating tactic. Samantha looked like she was going to be sick. The shell company they attempted to steal, I continued, was a trap. Carter Digital Holdings exists only on paper. It has no assets, no value, and no legitimate business purpose. It was created specifically to expose their criminal intent. I turned to face Jake and Samantha directly. You wanted to steal everything from me. Instead, you've lost everything yourselves. Detective Chen was already moving toward them with handcuffs. Jake Rivers, Samantha Carter, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted theft, and violation of your bail conditions. As the police led them away, Jake tried one last desperate play. This is entrapment, he shouted. You set us up. No, I replied calmly. You set yourselves up. I just gave you the rope. The reporters were in a frenzy, shouting questions and snapping photos, but I wasn't done yet. There's one more announcement, I said, waiting for the room to quiet down. Effective immediately, TechFlow Solutions will be merging with Meridian Tech in a deal worth approximately $100 million. Angela Wu will serve as CEO of the combined company, and I'll be taking a position as Chief Technology Officer. Angela stepped up to the microphone. We're also announcing the creation of the Carter Foundation for Child Safety, funded by a $10 million donation from the merger proceeds. The foundation will work to protect children from parental kidnapping and domestic violence. It was a perfect ending. I'd not only destroyed my enemies, but turned their crimes into something positive for other families. As the press conference ended and reporters filed out, I stood alone in the conference room for a moment, savoring the victory. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Dad, we saw you on TV at Grandma's house. You looked like a superhero. I smiled. Maybe I wasn't a superhero, but I'd protected my family and my business from people who wanted to destroy both. Jake and Samantha had bet against the underdog, thinking I was too trusting, too naive, too focused on spreadsheets and profit margins to fight back effectively. They'd learned too late that the quiet guy in the corner, the one who pays attention to details and plays the long game, is often the most dangerous opponent of all. Justice had been served, my children were safe, and my business was stronger than ever. For the first time in months, I felt like I could finally breathe,